So, when you hear the name H.G. Wells, what comes to mind? Probably things like time machines, towering Martian tripods, maybe an invisible man causing chaos, right? I mean, he's without a doubt one of the founding fathers of science fiction, a true visionary. But there's so much more going on beneath the surface of his work.
Because what if all those incredible futures he dreamed up weren't predictions, but warnings? And that right there is the real heart of his genius. Wells wasn't just spinning fantastic yarns for fun. He was using the future, using science fiction, as this powerful lens to take a hard look at the here and now. Okay, let's really get into this.
Of course, you can't talk about Wells without hitting the big ones. The Time Machine literally gave us the blueprint for a time-traveling vehicle. And The War of the Worlds, it pretty much invented the alien invasion story as we know it today. These books didn't just contribute to a genre, they defined it. But if you stop there, you're missing the real magic of his work. Every single one of those amazing stories was actually a super sharp, insightful critique of his own era, the Victorian Age. He was looking at things like class inequality, the ethics of science, the dangers of power, and using sci-fi to talk about it. Basically, his science fiction was social commentary in disguise.
So let's kick things off with his warnings about science. For Wells, you see, discovery wasn't all just wonder and progress. Oh no. It was loaded with moral traps, this recurring theme of what happens when ambition doesn't have a conscience. So picture this. In the Time Machine, the future of humanity is, well, it's split. Our time traveler zips forward to the year 802-701. And what does he find? Our species has become two. Living up on the surface are the Alloy. They're beautiful, kind of simple, and they're the descendants of the old idle rich. But down below, in the darkness, live the Morlocks, terrifying industrial predators who evolved from the working class. And now, they literally prey on the Alloy. And look, this was way more than just some monster story. It was Wells looking at the huge class divide of his time and hitting fast forward. He was basically shouting a warning. This is the logical conclusion of industrial capitalism. If that gap between the haves and the have-nots just keeps getting wider and wider, it's absolutely chilling. We see the same theme of dangerous ambition pop up again in The Invisible Man, but this time it's zoomed in on one guy. A brilliant scientist named Griffin figures out how to make himself invisible. Awesome, right? Well, no. Instead of setting him free, this incredible power completely isolates him from everyone. With no consequences for his actions, his paranoia just spirals. He gets more and more desperate until he loses his humanity completely, and it all ends in violence and tragedy. The very thing that gave him this godlike power is what ends up destroying him. And through this story, Wells is basically asking us a question that's still so relevant. What happens to your morality when nobody can see what you're doing? It's a terrifying look at how absolute power can, well, corrupt absolutely. This whole idea of scientific arrogance, hubris, it just explodes, literally, in the food of the gods. In this one, some scientists create this stuff that causes unstoppable growth. And the result? Pure chaos. We're talking giant chickens, giant wasps, even giant people running around. It's Wells's classic cautionary tale. Just because science can do something, it doesn't mean it should. He's screaming from the rooftops about the dangers of messing with nature before you really know what you're doing. All right, so Wells didn't just have scientists in his sights. He was aiming his critical eye at the biggest power structures of his time, imperialism and capitalism. And he used these wild, fantastic plots to show everyone the very real flaws they contained. And this is where we get one of the most brilliant allegories, I think, in all of literature. You see, on the surface, The War of the Worlds is just a nail-biting alien invasion story. But what's really going on is a blistering critique of the British Empire. The Martians, with their advanced technology, invade England and just wipe the floor with the population, doing to the British exactly what the British Empire had been doing to people all over the world. I mean, just stop and think about how radical that was for a second. We're at the absolute peak of the British Empire, and Wells makes his readers feel what it's like to be on the other side, to be the ones who were colonized. For the first time, they were facing a force that was way more powerful than they were. Suddenly, the most powerful nation on Earth was completely helpless. Wells just flipped the whole script, forcing people to question the morality of empire. But his critiques weren't always on this massive planetary scale. Wells was just as sharp when he pointed that lens much closer to home, turning from the battlefields of an alien invasion to the sketchy stuff happening on local store shelves.
Take his novel Tono Bungay. Here, he just completely skewers the world of commercialism and, let's be honest, snake oil medicine. The whole story is about this so-called miracle tonic that's marketed as a cure for everything. But in reality, it's basically useless garbage. Its value was all hype, all advertising, with almost zero actual substance. It's such a brilliant takedown of early mass marketing.
It was this really biting satire on how capitalism and advertising can get in bed together to exploit our deepest hopes and fears, all for a quick buck. Wells saw this huge danger in a society where selling a convincing lie could be way more profitable than telling the truth, a danger that's especially scary when you're talking about people's health.
So why are we talking about all this now? What's the takeaway? Well, it's because the warnings Wells was shouting over 100 years ago, they haven't gone away. If anything, they're louder and more urgent than ever.
Just look at these themes. The ethics of AI and gene editing? Check. The crazy gap between the rich and poor? Check. The consequences of war, misinformation, the power of marketing? Sound familiar? These are literally our headlines today. Wells was writing about our world. He just used the language of the future to do it.
And that's the key, right? His stories were never really about predicting the future, not literally. Think of them more like thought experiments. He built these incredible imaginative laboratories where he could test human nature under the stress of new technologies, unchecked power, and greed, hoping that we'd see the potential for disaster and, maybe choose a better path.
And that brings us right back to the beginning, to the big question. Wells held up this incredible mirror, showing us the dark places our own progress could take us. He warned us about the Morlocks, the Martians, and the invisible men we could create or even become. A whole century has gone by. So the question we really have to ask ourselves is, have